Welcome back. So this video will cover project maintenance and project reports. So in the first two videos we set up a project including our budgeted fee, and in the third video we applied time and expenses against that budgeted project. So here in this video we want to check out how we're doing against our contract and how we're doing against our plan. To do so, we're going to go to the Project Command Center, which, if you remember, can be located under Setup, Projects. This brings up our Project Command Center. So the project we want to look at is our Boise Test Project. We could try to find it in the list down below, but it's easier if we'll just type in what we know about it, and we'll let it search for it in the description. We found it here, and so we've selected that project, and then down below we see the project information. So the tab we're going to look at, which is probably your most commonly used tab, is going to be your Snapshot tab. Now if you cannot see your Snapshot tab, you can locate it by going up to Customize in the top right, and then going to Reports, and making sure that you have access to and you can check these three reports. So once you've done that, we'll click OK, and we'll see a Progress tab, a Snapshot tab, and a Plan tab. And like I mentioned, this Snapshot tab in the middle is probably going to be your most commonly used report. So we'll select the Snapshot tab, and that brings up this graph. So let's explain what's going on this graph. First thing is your snapshot is broken up between dollars and hours. On the left-hand side, we have a graph of the dollars, and we have numerical dollars down below. And on the right-hand side, we have graph of hours, and then the numerical hours down below. So focusing on the top for a second, the legend here in the middle is telling us that the blue bars are indicating our contract. The yellow is indicating our build. There's no yellow on this screen because we have not billed anything yet. The orange is indicating our work in progress. We'll come back to that. And the red is indicating our spent. So quick terminology lesson. Spent is your billing rates multiplied by your number of hours or your number of units. So two examples. If you bill $100 an hour for an employee and they put 8 hours on the project, then that creates $800 of spent. Another example, if you bill $16 per compression test and you put 10 compression tests on the expense report, it's going to put $160, 10 times 16, $160 of spent on the project. So hopefully you budgeted to have the compression test take place in your fee estimate, and then when we put the expenses against it, it's going to compare the contract against the spent. So the quickest way to compare your progress is just to look at your contract column and compare that against your spent column. So we can see here on this Boise field department, or the Boise field phase, we've spent about $1,400 and we budgeted $5,200. In hours though, we've spent 31 hours but we only budgeted 60. So there's a difference between the dollars and the hours. In dollars, we're not nearly as far as long as what we are in hours. Now that might be because the person that we're using is billing at a higher rate than the person that we had budgeted. So it's important that we see both of the pieces of information on the screen. Most importantly, make sure that you're focusing on the one that matters and just let the other piece of information tell you what it may. So looking up here at the top, what we'll notice is it groups together our build plus our work in progress. And then the spent has its own bar. And so let me explain why that's important. So down here on the bottom, the build, the work in progress, and the spent are all three different columns. And the reason for that is this. Typically what you'll see is as you put time against the project, the work in progress will be created. So when I put 1 hour against the project and I bill at $100 an hour, $100 of work in progress will be created. Now at the end of the period, we're going to bill for that. And so it'll go from work in progress to build. So you'll see the work in progress will go down and the build should go up by the same amount. Now the spent will always remain. So that's why we're tracking all three. So the spent is always going to be there no matter what happens to the build or work in progress. But what you should see is as you build the time, the work in progress will go down by the exact amount that the build goes up. And then the third category again is your spent will be tracking your total expenditures for that phase or for that project to date. Okay? So let's say I wanted to look at the detail for this Boise Field phase, because what we saw here is I hadn't spent nearly as much of the budget in dollars as I had in hours. So let's take a look at the detail for that phase. I can do that by clicking on the detail with an underline corresponding to that line. So when I click on that, it brings up a sub-report. And so in this sub-report, it's giving us the information here at the top. It's the Boise Test Project, and it's the CMT Boise Field phase. And then down below, it's going to break up our expenses and our labor and our consultant into three different line items. In this case, we only have labor on this line item. And so to drill into what this labor is, we'll click the plus sign. And this is going to give us the timesheet detail. So this is the employee type, and then the employee and the activity. So the employee type, administration, Cindy, and billable time is the activity. The total number of hours, the total spent amount, and the total amount of work in progress. On the left-hand column, we're going to see notes. So this is what she entered on her timesheets. These are the days that she entered the time, the number of hours, and her billing rate, or her spent rate. So it's multiplying the hours times the rate to come up with a spent amount and a work in progress amount. So we can compare what we anticipated spending with what we actually spent here on this page. And if we want to go back to the main report, we're going to click back to parent report. And that brings us back up to this front page. So this is going to be your most commonly used report, like I said. This report is a good 10,000-foot view looking exactly what you had contracted or budgeted with exactly what you had spent thus far. And you have good bar charts up here in the top to indicate about how long or how far into the project are you.